Good afternoon, boys and girls. This is Mrs. Schmidt reporting from her kitchen with a very bad hair day. I am joining you today to read the next chapter of Trumpet of the Swan. We will be reading chapter 5, Lewis. I don't know who Lewis is, but I believe we are going to get to know him. And as you can hear, I have a dishwasher running in the background. Sorry about that. One evening, a few weeks later, when the cygnets were asleep, the swan said to the cob, "Have you noticed anything different about one of our children, the one we call Lewis?" "Different?" replied the cob. "In what way is Lewis different from his brothers and sisters?" "Lewis looks all right to me. He's growing well. He swims and dives beautifully. He eats well. He will soon have his flight feathers." "Oh, he looks all right," said the swan, "and heaven knows he eats enough. He's healthy and bright and a great swimmer. But have you heard Lewis make a sound as the others do? Have you ever heard him use his voice to say anything? Have you ever heard him utter a single beep or a single burble?" "Come to think of it, I never have," replied the cob, who was beginning to look worried. "Have you ever heard Lewis say good night to us, as the others do? Have you ever heard him say good morning, as the others do in their charming little way, burbling and beeping?" "Now that you mention it, I never have," said the cob. "Goodness, what are you getting at? Do you wish me to believe that I have a son who is defective in any way? Such a revelation would distress me greatly. I want everything to go smoothly in my family life so that I can glide gracefully and serenely, now in the prime of my life, without being haunted by worry or disappointment. Fatherhood is quite a burden at best. I do not want the added strain of having a defective child, a child that has something the matter with him." "Well," said the wife, "I've been watching Lewis lately. In my opinion, the little fellow can't talk. I've never heard him make one sound. I think he came into the world lacking a voice. If he had a voice, he'd use it, same as the others do." "Why, this is terrible," said the cob. "This is distressing beyond words. This is a very serious matter." His wife looked at him in amusement. "It's not too serious now," she said, "but it will be serious 2 or 3 years from now when Lewis falls in love, as he will surely do. A young male swan will be greatly handicapped in finding a mate if he's unable to say co-oh, co-oh, or if he can't utter the usual endearments to the young female of his choice." "Are you sure?" asked the cob. "Certainly I'm sure," she replied. "I can remember perfectly well in the springtime, years ago, when you fell in love with me and began chasing after me. What a sight you were, and what a lot of noise you made. It was in Montana, remember?" "Of course I remember," said the cob. "Well, the thing that attracted me to you most was your voice, your wonderful voice." "It was?" said the cob. "Yes, you had the finest, most powerful, most resonant voice of any of the young male swans in the Red Rock Lakes National Wildlife Refuge in Montana." Ooh, big ones. Resonant voice, the most resonant voice down here. I don't know what you think resonant might mean, but she is saying that she fell in love with him because of his voice. She's also saying the Red Rocks Wildlife Refuge in Montana. Now, refuge is one of our vocabulary words, boys and girls. Refuge means a safe place or a haven for animals to stay without having people mess with them. "I did," said the cob. "Yes, indeed. Every time I heard you say something in that deep voice of yours, I was ready to go anywhere with you." "You were?" said the cob. He was obviously delighted with his wife's praise. It tickled his vanity and made him feel great. He had always fancied himself as having a fine voice, and now to hear it from his wife's own lips was a real thrill. In the pleasure of the moment, he forgot all about Lewis and thought entirely of himself. And of course, he did remember that enchanted springtime on the lake in Montana when he had fallen in love. He remembered how pretty the swan had been, how young and innocent she seemed, how attractive, how desirable. Now he realized fully that he could never have been able to woo her and win her if he hadn't been able to say anything. "We'll not worry about Lewis for the time being," said the swan. "He's still very young, but we must watch him next winter when we are in Montana for the season. We must stay together as a family until we see how Lewis makes out." She walked over to where her sleeping cygnets were settled down, and she sat down next to them. The night was chill. Carefully, she lifted one wing and covered the cygnets with it. They stirred in their sleep, and they drew closer to her. The cob stood quietly thinking about what his wife had just told him. He was a brave, noble bird, and already he was beginning to work out a plan for his little son, Lewis. "If it's really true that Lewis has no voice," said the cob to himself, "then I shall provide him with a device of some sort to enable him to make a lot of noise. There must be some way out of this difficulty. After all, my son's a trumpeter, Swan. He should have a voice like a trumpet. Maybe that's what the meaning means. But first I will test him to make sure what his mother says is true. The cob was unable to sleep that night. He stood on one leg quietly, but sleep never came. Next morning, after everyone had enjoyed a good breakfast, he led Louis apart from the others. Louis, he said, I wish to speak to you alone. Let's just you and I take a swim by ourselves to the other end of the pond where we can talk privately without being interrupted. Louis was surprised by this, but he nodded his head and followed his father, swimming strongly in his wake. He did not understand why his father wanted to speak with him alone, without his brothers and sisters. Now, said the cob, when they reached the upper end of the pond, here we are, gracefully floating, supremely buoyant, at some distance from the others, in perfect surroundings. A fine morning, with the pond quiet, except for the song of blackbirds, making the air sweet. I wish my father would get to the point, thought Louis. Do you wish his father would get to the point, too? I do. This is an ideal place for our conference, continued the cob. There is something I feel I should discuss with you, very candidly and openly, something that concerns your future. We need not range over the whole spectrum of bird life, but just confine our talk to the one essential thing that is before us on this unusual occasion. Oh, I wish my father would get to the point, thought Louis, who by this time was getting very nervous. It's come to my attention, Louis, continued the cob, that you rarely say anything. In fact, I can't recall ever hearing you utter a sound. I have neither heard you speak, nor say ko-oh, nor cry out, either in fear or in joy. This is most unusual for a young trumpeter. It is serious, Louis. Let me hear you say beep. Go ahead, say it. Say beep. Poor Louis. While his father watched, he took a deep breath, opened his mouth, and let the air out, praying it would say beep. But there wasn't a sound. Try again, Louis, said his father. Perhaps you're not making enough of an effort. Louis tried again. It was no use. No sound came from his throat. He shook his head sadly. Watch me, said the cob. He raised his neck to his full height and cried, "Caw!" so loud that it was heard by every creature for miles around. Now let me hear you say beep, he commanded. Say beep, Louis, loud and clear. Louis tried. He couldn't beep. We finally came to a picture. This is a chapter with not many pictures. There's Louis's dad trying to get him to play beep, and sweet little Louis trying so hard. Let me hear you burble. Go ahead and burble, like this. Burble, burble, burble. Burble's a fun onomatopoeia, isn't it, boys and girls? Burble, burble. Louis tried to burble. He couldn't do it. No sound came. Well, said the cob, I guess it's no use. I guess you are dumb. When he heard the word dumb, Louis felt like crying. The cob saw that he had hurt Louis's feelings. Oh, you misunderstood me, my son, he said in a comforting voice. You failed to misunderstand my use of the word dumb, which has two meanings. If I had called you a dumb cluck or a dumb bunny, that would have meant that I have a poor opinion of your intelligence. Actually, I think you're perhaps the brightest, smartest, most intelligent of all my cygnets. Words sometimes have two meanings. We know that, boys and girls. And the word dumb is such a word. Excuse me. A person who can't see is called blind. A person who can't hear is called deaf. A person who can't speak is called dumb. That simply means he can't say anything. Do you understand? Louis nodded his head. He felt better, and he was grateful to see his father explaining the word that had two meanings. He still felt awfully unhappy, though. Do not let an unnatural sadness settle over you, Louis, said the cob. Swans must be cheerful, not sad, graceful, not awkward, brave, not cowardly. Remember that the world is full of youngsters who have some sort of handicap that they must overcome. You apparently have a speech defect. I am sure you will overcome it in time. Let's see, there may even be some slight advantage at your age in not being able to say anything. It compels you to be a good listener. Boys and girls, this part is very true. The world is full of talkers, but it is rare to find anyone who listens. And I assure you that you can pick up more of the information when you are listening than when you are talking. My father does quite a lot of talking himself, thought Louis. And Louis is right. His father does do a lot of talking, even though he talks about how important it is to listen. Some people, continued the cob, go through life chattering and making a lot of noise with their mouth. They never really listen to anything. They are too busy expressing their opinions, which are often unsound or based on bad information. Ask your parents about Facebook, boys and girls. and Instagram, and how they feel about that situation. And if they're reading along with me right now, I'm sure that they're nodding their heads. There are a lot of folks who do express a lot of information in their opinions and don't always read Boys and Girls, and it's really important to read and to listen. Let's see. Therefore, my son, be of good cheer. Enjoy life. Learn to fly. Eat well. Drink well. Use your ears. Use your eyes. And I promise that someday I will make it possible for you to use your voice. There are mechanical devices that convert air into beautiful sounds. One such device is called a trumpet. I saw a trumpet once in my travels. I think you may need a trumpet in order to live a full life. I've never known a trumpeter swan to need a trumpet. But your case is different. I intend to get you what you need. I don't know how I will manage this, but in the fullness of time it shall be accomplished. And now our talk has come to a close. Let us return gracefully to the other end of the pond, where your mother and brothers and sisters await us. I've got to rest now after doing all that dad talking. By the way, my son happens to play the trumpet, and so I will pull out a trumpet and show it to you if it becomes important in the story. I promise. The cob turned and swam off, and Lewis followed. It had been an unhappy morning for him. He felt frightened at being different from his brothers and sisters. It scared him to be different. He couldn't understand why he had come into the world without a voice. Everyone else seemed to have a voice. Why didn't he? Fate is cruel, he thought. Fate is cruel to me. Then he remembered that his father had promised to help, and he felt better. Soon they joined the others, and everyone started water games, and Lewis joined in, dipping and splashing and diving and twisting. Lewis could splash water farther than any of the others, but he couldn't shout while he was doing it. To be able to shout while you are splashing water is half the fun. Ooh, that chapter ended with an opinion from the author. Can you find it? To be able to shout while you are splashing water is half the fun. Do you agree with that, boys and girls? Do you agree that half the fun of splashing water is to be able to shout while you're doing it? Or is it just as much fun to splash the water quietly? I wonder if laughing feels the same when you can't make the noise of laughter, even though you're shaking with it and it's in your tummy and in your chest and your lungs and your mouth. An interesting thought too, isn't it, boys and girls? So that's it. That's the end of that chapter. I will pull out a trumpet if it becomes important. And if you have any questions, send them to me on Seesaw. Or if you have your own opinions about whether it's more fun to shout while splashing with water or whether it's more fun to quietly splash the water. Depends, I guess, on whether you're sneaking up on somebody or not, right? So have a great day, boys and girls. Thanks for joining me. Bye.